Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. Now, we are a weekly podcast focusing on the paranormal, the supernatural, and the metaphysical. Now, join us for thought-provoking discussions on paranormal phenomena, conspiracies, and all things unexplained as we talk to researchers and investigators about ghosts and hauntings, UFOs and aliens, urban legends, cryptids, and so much more. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. You can also visit us at www.paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. I thank you again for watching and or listening, and we hope to see you for the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. So grab yourself a drink and a snack. Turn the lights off on the way back. Find yourself a nice comfy spot and enjoy this episode of Paranomaly. Stay with us, folks. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in, joining in, watching, listening, all that good stuff. We have a very special guest on. Her name is Olivia James. Olivia was born into programs by a family of drug traffickers. Olivia was trauma trained in programs like MK Ultra, and her mind was split to create alters used for missions on Earth and in space. She was used for espionage, occult, beta, and corporate programs. Olivia's main focus is finding her memories, using them to heal her alters, and hoping that her memories can assist others. Olivia, thank you so much for joining us. Hey, Jim, how are you tonight?
Good, not bad.
Olivia, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Okay, Olivia, please tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Olivia. I was in what people consider the programs. I necessarily don't call it the secret space programs because that's not really the primary focus of my memories. I call it the programs just because there was so much all-encompassing. That's kind of like the way I term it. And I've written 2 books. I call it the Gray Mouse series. I'm working on a 3rd book now, and they're memoirs regarding my particular memories about being in the programs.
Okay, awesome. We will get the links up in just a little bit. Jim, go ahead.
So why don't we start with your background, your parents, and then lead in from that to the programming.
Okay.
If that's the most logical way to do it.
For me, it is, because I think it's important for people to understand how I actually got connected to the programs in the first place.
Right.
So we have that. So how I like to always start when I give this information is I always say that I had interesting parents. So my father, he was recruited at a very young age for military intelligence, right about 18 years old. He was stationed on the German-Russian border, and he was a codebreaker, and he learned to speak German within probably like 6 months. So they took him out there and they were doing that. He was very intelligent, just different. You know, it's kind of weird for someone to be recruited that young out of a small town for intelligence, such important work. But when he came out of that, I don't know if he was able to find kind of where he fit into things, or maybe he already had this connection, but he started working for various, what we call them now cartels. Back in the 60s and 70s, I'm not quite sure if they called them cartels, but a lot of, if anybody wants to research, they can find this information. It's very public and researched information regarding various government agencies and their connection to drug trafficking in the early 60s and 70s. It's very easy to find that information. So he did start working for some of these huge, I don't know if you call them family. I just say cartels because that's the easiest way to say it. So when he was working with these cartels, he was doing a lot of the actual trafficking back and forth across the border. So he knew how to fly an airplane. He would go by bus. He would car a lot, boat, everything. So he was very good at that. And he was, for his young age, he was making massive amounts of money. Money that most kids wouldn't see at that age. Him and my mother was also helping him. She was helping him do the money laundering and some of the trafficking on the buses and things like that. So I know sometimes when my mom, when she would talk about it, she thought that they were just that intelligent, that they were getting back and forth across the border so easily, but in actuality, if you research it, actually they had, agreements made that people that were trafficking were able to get back and forth across easily. They weren't being bothered because they were doing this work and because of government involvement in this work. So it became pretty easy for them. They were making a lot of money. Anyways, what had happened was that my father's kind of downfall was that he started becoming addicted to his own product, and he was bringing massive amounts of heroin and marijuana into the country. So he became addicted to heroin, and that's a huge issue because that became like his weakness, and they saw that as a huge weakness because he was, you missing drops, and you're just not able to do the same type of work that he was doing before. So what they were trying to do is they're trying to scare him a little bit, and they started doing like these mini raids of the home. I was a baby when this was happening. They were doing mini raids, and it didn't change anything for him. I mean, obviously, if anybody had an addiction, you know how hard it would be for him to get off, heroin that quickly. So they saw it as a huge problem, and they had to disconnect from him. So they had this huge raid, and there was a huge public trial in the town where I'm from, in this, the place where I'm from. There's a huge public trial. It was in all the newspapers and everything. It went on for a long time.
Is this in America, and is your father American? Or is that too much of an identifying detail?
Nope, Midwest area.
Okay.
Midwest. Yep. So that happened. And there was this huge, like I said, there was a huge trial, and it was looking like he was going to go to prison for life based on the work that he had done. It was very bad situation. It didn't look good for him. So like I said, this went on for a really long time. And then at the end of the trial, out of the blue, they just said they had the wrong person. They let him go, and they gave him a government job. So they hired a known drug trafficker and drug addict for a local government job. So that's really interesting that happened. And
so by that point already, to have gotten that sort of outcome of that trial, he was already approached, I guess, prior to that point, I assume.
Yes, he was working with 3-letter agencies and the cartels at the same time, because they are all connected in doing this. It's literally their program that they're running. Trying to get money. I mean, trying to get drugs into our country. It was huge. They were huge with that. So what I have found out is that through my work, so I wanted to explain that I do something called hosting, and something that I call remote viewing, because a lot of people call it remote viewing when they have coordinates and they use kind of like a scientific process. I don't know the full details of that, but I'm just describing what I do. And remote viewing it's a similar process, but I'm not just looking at a scene. I can actually travel there, bilocate, and go to the place and interact with the scene, or not just, I'm actually there when I'm doing this. If I'm doing a remote viewing, I go there. So that's how, and I do something called host. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so I've always heard that there was, and I'm not sure if I'm accurate about this, there's a difference between remote viewing and astral travel. And I've always been of the understanding that remote viewing, your consciousness doesn't go anywhere, or your soul, if you like. So you're actually traveling with your consciousness to these places.
Yeah, I can do it if I wanted to. So when I'm doing the remote viewing, I use all of it. So it's more of a psychic ability than it is a scientific process. For me personally, I use a whole psychic ability, and especially with my hosting, is I'm able to allow anything to take over my body to speak. And it's not just, people think it's mediumship and channeling. It's an advanced form of trance mediumship, because I'm allowing something to literally, go inside my body. It's not just me speaking, they're inside me. I'm asleep, and they've taken over. So I'm allowing myself to be possessed.
Right. Yeah. So some people do refer to this as channeling, but they specify
Yes, they
it
do.
as trance channeling rather than, I guess, your standard channeling. So you are not consciously present when you
No.
do the channeling, or are you at all present? Are you in the background and you're sort of dimly
Your
aware
higher
of what's going on?
self
Or are
is
you
always present. So if I needed to do
right?
something or if I needed to say something, that highest level of myself, because I'm able to access that, can speak. And actually, the reason why I call it hosting is because a demonic entity taught me that word when I was hosting. They said what I do is called hosting. It is not
Mhm.
channeling, they told me. They said you are a host.
Yeah, I think
So
it's a
that's
an
where I got
important
the word
term.
from.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I got the word from. It's from a demon. He told me that I'm a host. So that's
Hmm.
how I got that. So this is what I'm going to say. This is how I got the information, a lot of the information from my father, because my father's been dead for a really long time. So this is how I got so much information. I allowed him to host, use my body to host and step back into this world and tell the story that he wasn't able to tell when he was alive because he had to take his secrets to the grave. When you have something like that, you can't just, it's not like how I'm trying to do this. He encourages me now, but he said when he was alive, it was different for him. He couldn't talk about that. He made an agreement, and the agreement was he would stay out of prison if he signed something over to them, and that thing that he signed over was me. So he's allowed to have a normal life, and he made that sacrifice of one of his children in
Hmm.
order to have a normal life.
And I will just say that there's many other cases like this. In fact, we were talking about Kathy O'Brien before the show backstage. She herself, her child, or excuse me, her father was uh, someone who was into child pornography and was distributing child pornography in some kind of child pornography ring. And they busted him and intervened and approached him at that point and said, we will let you go if you sell Kathy basically into the programs. And that's how she got into the programs through blackmail, basically. So there's a lot of precedent for this kind of setup where they essentially blackmail the person into giving away their children.
Yeah, and military involvement, huge aspect of this is his life, working for intelligence. And I guess it never
Mhm.
leaves you because he had to listen to them even after. And he told me, so when his ghost, or well, I call his spirit, I don't say ghost really, his spirit was speaking
Mhm.
through me, he said that, you know, he could not ask them questions. He did everything they said. And if he didn't, he said we'd all be dead anyways. So he said this was his only option to, to take care of everyone in one swoop, And he said that whenever I had to be taken somewhere or anything, he just said I looked normal when I came back because I wasn't talking or crying or anything. I had lost that emotion as a child. And he said that I looked okay. So he said he knew a little about what they were probably doing, but he didn't know everything. And in that
Okay.
time, when he speaks through me,
Mhm.
he gave me a gift. He spoke through me with his earth personality. And his earth personality, let's just say, I don't consider like always a good person. Very narcissistic, very self-centered. What he needed to do was, in the best interest for him. He always did that, what was best for him. And when he comes to speak through me, he gives me that gift of speaking like that. And I needed it, whether it hurt me. And he did say a lot of really, awful things to me and about me, saying that he never wanted to be around me for my whole life. And we were estranged pretty much my whole life before he died, because he said the reason he couldn't be around me because he thought I was disgusting because of he said he knew what they were doing to me. And that guilt, he had to like change it into a form of disgust. So when he looked at me, he didn't feel that emotional connection. He just felt like, he didn't want to know what they were doing to me because he knew it was probably bad.
And this whole story that you got from him, this was through the hosting
Yes.
mechanism, and that's very interesting.
Yes.
And so his personality was very much uh, consistent with how you knew him as a child, or do you have a lot of conscious memory of him as a child, or
Yes. I mean, I do have a lot of conscious memory of him. And, it's pretty much on par with especially since my mom is still alive. So when I'm thinking if people want to know if this can be proven, yes, there's court records, and obviously my mom is still alive, so she was part of this. So she has all this information. She doesn't have the information about the secret contracts and things like this. She has no clue. Whether I think that's real or not, I don't know. So if I asked her myself if she had ever seen me leave when I was a child, anywhere or go anywhere, and she said it's the only thing she said was it's possible. I don't know. That's all she said. And that was the end of it.
Okay, so let's go to the very first time when you were taken, right after he sold you, basically, and they brought you to a psychiatric facility, I think.
Yes, it's a psychiatric. So I was taken about 6 or 7, and from what I know, like I said, my father's passed. So my mom, she doesn't really say she remembers me being gone for a long period of time. But she even doesn't have memories. I don't remember. She always says, I don't know. I don't remember. Could be, possibly. That's the only answers I get. So who knows what was happening? And they had so many children. I don't know if they even would care if I was gone for a certain amount of time, or
Right,
maybe they thought I was, who knows what they thought.
and it's
So
possible they could have been interfering. Actually, normally they would, interfere with her memory and potentially your father's as well.
exactly. We don't even
Uh,
know how far it went. We have no
right,
clue because they had a completely different process in the 60s. They probably were doing other things that, and plus they did a lot of drugs when they were young. So I really don't know what they thought, but I was taken to a psychiatric hospital on the East
Mhm.
Coast. Um and this place, it's no longer open, by the way. This place
What
is no
age
longer
was this, by the way?
7, 6-ish, 7, around 7. I say 7 because I can't remember the exact date, but that's when I look at myself, when I see myself, that's what I looked like at 7. So that's the date that I've stuck with, is around 7. So when I went there, they had me in a van. I pulled up, and a woman comes walking out, and this woman was just I don't know. I always talk about her like she was just so different from because I grew up after my all the stuff with my father. We grew up in like a bad neighborhood, poor neighborhood. That's just the nature of that work. We were always in the very bad areas. So when I saw this woman, she just looked ethereal to me, like, because I had never grown up around people like that or been around people like her. It was this older and it was a woman. The psychiatrist was a woman that was conducting this, secret program. It was a woman, and she had this white hair that she pinned up on the sides. She always wore these like nice, really nice satin suits, something, I don't know if that was popular in the 60s or what, but she always had that on. She had these two particular, what we used to call orderlies. They call them like nurses' aides now or whatever. And they were males. She had those two that worked specifically with her in our wing. And in the particular wing where they were doing this secret project, it was just me and another child. And this little boy, his name was Jacob, and we just called him Jake. So what they were trying to do is their main focus was trying to complete a process called syncopated dissociation, where they wanted me and this other child to connect, during the trauma, during the pain, to see if we could both dissociate and leave the body at the same time, and what kind of outcome that would bring. They wanted to try to make, some of these paranormal things measurable. And it's very difficult to do that. So they were experimenting with not just trauma-based mind control, but they were experimenting with LSD, electroshock therapy, a lot of hypnosis, sexual abuse, physical abuse, psychological manipulation, emotional manipulation, and emotional abuse. So they
Okay.
were conducting this pretty regularly in a place we call the playroom. So there was a particular area that they would have some of these activities take place, and we called it the playroom. And in that, it was just, something that you would consider like, I don't know, anybody that grew up in the 60s and 70s, a lot of those earth tone colors and some of those tables that they used to have in schools, they were there. There were books and toys and things like that. But they would come in their room and they would conduct some of these systematic, torturous activities, almost like I consider it to be so systematic that it reminded me of a preschool program where they were changing the activity every 15 to 20 minutes to make
Yeah.
it expected, because they were conducting some type of behavior modification with
And
children.
so, yeah, what do you think as far as changing the activity constantly? What the sort of methodology is behind that? So you're not sort of prepared for anything to kind of throw you off, uh, or or why is it, not just like a consistent form of torture, to break you? Why is there this sort of variation of different things? Do you have any kind of insight into why the constant change of activities?
Because they wanted us to sync up. They wanted to see and prove that when we could sync together in terms of, they call it trauma twinning. You're being tortured at the same time. It's called a trauma twin.
And you've heard of this elsewhere?
Yeah, I've heard of that term. I really don't call it trauma twinning because I know the specific word that they use, and it was called syncopated dissociation.
Uh-huh.
And so
What's
I
the
knew that.
what's the advantage of that as far as programming and
They think that that's a force to be reckoned with. If you can connect with somebody, and there's so much power, and there's a lot of factions and a lot of different agencies struggling for that power, and there's a lot of people doing things in the name of power and conquest. And if we're wondering why any of this happens, that's, to me, what I've been told, it's everything's done in the name of power and conquest and control of
so
this world and other worlds.
do you think they had any intent for you and Jacob to work together, or how would that power actually
That's part of the reason they wanted to do that, is to see if they could get us to work together. They love having, people that can do that, because they find that very favorable for particular jobs, especially something like a spy mission or something like that. A lot of espionage is done with singular, people. You only do it as an individual, but there's some other that couples, would be good for. And that's one of the reasons they do something like that, is to, almost be getting you ready for like an espionage type
Yeah, I
position.
wonder. I'm just thinking as far as the creation of alters, and maybe you can speak to this, whether or not there would be some sort of like mirroring of the alters, like the alters that they would program in you would be kind of mirrored in him, and they would be kind of like the same kind of program. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wonder if it ties into that as well. But I
Very
don't.
similar.
Yeah.
Very similar. And they would have us, I know the psychiatrist, she tried this thing where, because of hypnosis, and this is how, part of the reason how I found out I'm so good at this, doing this, kind of like shifting my consciousness so significantly that, I'm able to kind of recall some of and bring back some of this ability that I had, and that was, opened up in me as a child. Because the psychiatrist would take us in her office. She would have me and Jacob sit in these chairs, and she would have us put our palms up. And in the middle of our palm, she would put like something like an acupuncture needle, something very thin that's not too painful, but just enough. And that's how you would able to, that was like a signal to your mind to release from the body. And that's how me and Jacob learned how to go in trance, dissociate, astral travel, that kind of thing, because we were doing so much, trauma and electroshock, and, being harmed physically by them and sexually, that sometimes when we left the body, that was the only time we could be children. There was a time I saw him being shocked, but when you actually looked, I saw him, like, his spirit just playing around the room, just running around and being silly, because his body was experiencing the pain, but he was able to leave the body that's what we did. We escaped that pain. That's what our whole why we left the body, is to escape the physical pain of what was happening, and something that type of experience shatters the mind of a child. So we were able to leave that, and that's how I think that kind of leads to how I've been able to, recover these because of that time.
So let's explain this a little bit, for the viewers who might not be aware of trauma-based mind control. So I think there's two elements of it here, and the one element I really wasn't quite acutely aware of until I listened to your testimony. So on the one hand, they're inducing extreme pain, okay, and torture, so that your mind fractures, basically, so that you form.
Yes.
The mind does this thing naturally, or the psyche does this thing naturally, in order to kind of make it so you can still function even having gone through traumatic experiences. It forms like an amnesic barrier around those memories where you endured trauma and really intense pain. So that way, the rest of your mind can kind of operate as normal, and you're not affected by that trauma.
Same as now, how I'm able to speak so rationally because this is my original self
Mm.
speaking to you all. Those
Yeah.
altars that I had, which I had 118, which is kind of a small amount compared to other people, 118 altars that were created in this psychiatric hospital for various reasons. I had 6 front altars that were the main competing altars because they're the ones that had the most serious work to do. So they kind of, shifted around for a lot of years, shifted around. And now that I'm myself, my original self, I look back and I can see, and I sometimes I can't believe at some of my behaviors, and because of my personality changes.
Mhm.
It's so interesting to see, how real that was, and how they were making these pockets and holes, in my own mind. And if anybody knows, if you've ever been able to, if you could ever see what I've seen inside my own mind, it is amazing. The mind is so massive
Yeah,
and expansive.
I really want to get into that
Yes.
specifically after we get through the program, and that really interests
Yes.
me when you I think you said in another podcast, it's amazing what you can discover, how much you can discover inside of
Yeah, it
someone,
is.
and the
It
worlds
is.
that are in there.
There are
Um,
worlds inside each of you. You've created the world with your own mind, and it is real. It's not something that, to me, I don't consider it a false reality because it's something that you've created within that complexity of your own mind. And when people are looking at, when they're saying the matrix was external, it wasn't. When I looked inside the mind and got very, very deep, I saw that the matrix was inside the individual mind. So that's just something different that I saw with
mhm.
my own ability.
Yeah, let's come back to that. But getting back to trauma-based mind control. So on the one hand, they're fracturing the mind, they're creating compartments, they're programming these compartments for very specific functions. But then they're also, I think, inducing pain and trauma to cause you inadvertently to kind of learn the ability to disassociate from the body, to go out of body, I guess. Because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong anywhere here, they're inducing pain, and your soul, as a coping mechanism to deal with this pain, figures out how to readily leave the body. And so they also want this ability, right? The ability to disembody easily, at will,
They had a
or
lot of,
their will.
they considered Jacob and I remember the woman said that we were, prized pupils, that we exceeded their expectations for taking to trauma, which means that when they were saying that, because I viewed it, I saw what they're doing, the abuse, we became so acclimated to the abuse is why they were thinking that we had done so well because we learned to anticipate the abuse without reaction, without reactionary measures. They would come and harm us and we would show no emotion. They would starve us, they wouldn't feed us, you stopped even having to go to the bathroom. That's insane to have a child be so broken down that they don't need anything. They don't cry for anything. They don't ask for anything. They just sit there and wait for the next activity, which is the next trauma-based or torturous activity. That's what they considered a success because they saw that as an adult that would be useful to us in being able to take that pain and be able, because if you're making soldiers, you want them
Right.
to be able
You
to
want
take the pain.
you
If you're
you want
making soldiers, you want them to not be able to tell what's going on. So these altars, if I have an altar that does a specific job, it's so well hidden if the altar goes back inside. Literally, my front self will have no idea. So if somebody were to capture us and say, "Hey, did you do this? Tell us," you literally will not know. But it is accessible by deep hypnosis. If these people wanted to debrief by something that I had recorded with the photographic memory, which one of my altars have, something they would debrief with a deep trance in order to access that part of the mind, which can be accessed with codes, triggers, sounds that they were also using in the playroom. Like I remember specific lights being flashed when we were doing hypnosis techniques with the psychiatrist. She used a red and green light on both sides to flash the lights and things like that. Different images, different sounds, different words. She would create these words as triggers. I mean, there's still a lot of hidden deep down inside me. Sometimes when I'm doing like a regression or hosting or remote viewing something, I'll try to access a lot of these codes and just make sure I have them for future in case something were to happen. If one of my alters kind of tried to come back, I have codes that I have just in case this one comes back. I know the code to make them go back to sleep and that things like that. It's so much, and it's so expansive when you're talking about how your mind is, compartmentalized and broken down into different pieces, because like I said, some of these alters are living their own lives, that they've created worlds inside my own mind.
Do you get the codes straight from the alters themselves? Do you communicate to the alters and they evidently know the codes because, that's how they're triggered? Or how did you access the
No.
codes?
Trance. Because this happened to me recently. I had so
Well,
I
yeah.
have this tech. Oh, go ahead. I was going to say, I very much kind of identify with this particular gray mouse altar. When I talk about gray mouse, it's an altar that I have. This particular altar was, created for corporate espionage work. So it's a very anxious type, mousy. It has that persona, very mousy, very quiet, trying to get in and get out of places without being seen. So that's where that comes from, that gray mouse altar. But also, if she comes and tries to take over, my personality changes. It's not something I want. I don't want that because she's not like me, my original self. I consider her kind of like a spaz. She's very anxious, very scared, I can't deal with that. She did take over. This was probably last year. I just couldn't stop her because I ended up getting a trigger with somebody was talking about mice. And that's been a phobia my whole life. Anything about mice, somebody talks about mice, I see mice on TV, I see mice in a book. It's an automatic trigger sometimes. I'm trying to get better at it now, but it happened to me last year where somebody was talking about, and I just shifted. It happened instantaneously. And so in order for me to stop that and stop her from having such a firm hold on that front part of my brain, I had to use a deep trance in order to travel. And I went so deep to try to find this code. It was so far in. It was like within. That's how many layers this code was hidden by. So I finally found that code. Yeah, I found that code very deep, but I keep it close now just in case that happens. And not that I have animosity towards any of my alters. I with all the work I've done in talking to them and letting them speak, I totally understand, how they were created from this trauma. That's why I don't want anybody, I'm not trying to kill them or harm them. What I did in the end, I was working with a hypnotherapist, Misha Johnston. She's great if anybody knows her.
Yeah, I've heard of her.
Yes, we ended up working on trying to put these alters to sleep, not to harm them, but put them to sleep. And I asked them, I said, your time is done. You've done work forever. It's time for you to go into retirement. And in the end, they did work with me and they agreed to go into retirement. They didn't fight me. They didn't try to harm me. Like other people say their alters are trying to hurt them and things. I haven't experienced that. What I've discovered is they're literally there for my own survival. So now if I see, because sometimes they'll try to creep into my subconscious by dreams or thoughts and things like that. If I have a dream about my survival alter, I know that there's an immediate threat in the environment, or else she wouldn't be around. She wouldn't show herself in my dream in some way unless there was some type of threat that I needed to be aware of. So in that scheme, they're there in a way to protect me. So I learned that.
So they are somewhat consciously aware of what
Yes.
Is going on, even though they are in the back of the psyche somewhere.
Yeah, because it's me.
Is.
Yeah,
Right.
it still is me. So, I know a lot of people, this is my experience. I know other people talk about that they think that they're outside of them, but these are a part of me and they are me. Whether they're different and have these different, they are me still. So I have to take responsibility that, they are acting because of me, because of the front, the original self is here. So.
Yeah. Okay. If anyone's confused about this, I recommend looking into dissociative identity disorder, or what used to be called multiple personality disorder. And there's some good documentaries which will give you immense clarity about what we're talking about here with alters. This can be really confusing, I think, to someone who doesn't know about that condition. But let's jump back to the timeline. Okay.
Yes.
The psychiatric hospital. Oh, by the way, there was a question. What happened to Jacob? Do you know anything about
Yeah,
his
he's alive.
whereabouts?
Yeah, I was able to contact him by my psychic abilities. He's alive. He doesn't want anything to do with this. He told me to I speak for him. He doesn't want anything to do with this. And so I speak for him. And Jacob isn't his real name. They give us fake names all the time in the programs because they don't want you to connect to your identity. They want to
Mhm.
take your whole identity from you. So
And so did they
he
mind?
just doesn't want anything to do with this.
Did they mind wipe you as far as, or like when you were going through the programming,
Yes.
were you constantly in? Were the altars mainly functioning at that time, like, or throughout the programming? Were you
Yeah.
aware of back home? Like, were you aware of your life back home, or because the altars themselves, they would, I think, right, be cut off from that, or it wouldn't be helpful for them to sort of have conscious awareness of your normal identity or your past, or
You think it's all I think we think that everything is completely gone from us, and I think they think that. I think the coordinators and the programmers and handlers, I think that they think we're completely mind wiped. But in my case, things were lingering in my mind. And it's just if you let your mind open up, it's there for you to find. So that's how I was able to access a lot of it is, just because of myself and getting triggered by different things.
okay. All right, so back to the timeline at the psychiatric hospital. So
Yes.
they're
I was
programming
gonna,
you, they're
yeah.
splitting the mind, they're creating alters, they're creating the ability to disassociate, to leave the body, and what from there? Move
Yeah.
on
So I
from.
wanted to talk about how they were able to refer me out to a kind of like a special, what they call special sector. And I have to talk about my past life because it's so important of how I got connected to that and how I'm able to do a lot of this work now is because of past lives. And this is probably the reason why I was chosen for certain jobs is because of these past lives. Because when we were doing this hypnosis work with this programmer, she was able to access this through our own minds and our own spirits. And that's kind of the why I can do this now is because of that. But and if I'm able to access my past lives, then there's no reason why she couldn't have done it when I was a child because I can do it now. So I just want to talk about some of the past lives that we found. um so
Did they found that you also simultaneously found as they were looking into your.
I say we because I know it was probably done as a child and I know I've done it now with both conscious recall of past lives and also expansion using my own psychic abilities to get further details on these lives. So this is why it's so detailed is because I can use I've already had the recall of it. So what I did was I worked with someone to help me go into a trance so I could expand on the conscious recall of these past lives. So what they were doing is they were also using my prior deaths in some of these past lives to kind of seal in the trauma. So they would do similar things that happened to me in past lives, like reasons why I died, and they would use it in the psychiatric hospital to kind of
Yeah,
double seal that trauma. And it really does. If you think about, okay, I've already died this way before, and then you bring it back and, put it back in my body, like imagine the impact on at the cellular level of something of
yeah,
that kind of like genetic memory. It's,
I,
it's a huge impact on a child.
No,
yeah,
no,
I
Olivia, hold on one second here.
Yes.
I'm a little confused myself,
Hmm.
and I am curious. There was just somebody asked if you could describe the mind wipe process. I'm kind of confused here. What
Which,
what is the mind wiping process?
if we're talking about when they mind wipe us to return us back home, that's a chemical process from what I've discovered in my own
Now,
in my experience.
what do you mean that's a chemical process?
In order to mind wipe me at that time, when I left Mars, they used chemicals to completely take everything. But in the psychiatric hospital as a child, they used, trauma, they used alters, mind control, And then they also used, hypnosis.
Okay.
Because
Yeah,
I can
again,
in dissociation, because I can dissociate now very easily. And if anybody's ever practiced dissociation, it is definitely an ability. I consider it an ability that I can also dissociate different parts of my body at just if I wanted to dissociate my arm, I can do that. My leg, you can if you really practice this, you can do it in different areas, where you're pretty much paralyzed if you let your mind take over that. It's very interesting to see something like that. I've had a lot of witnesses to what I can do. So for me, when I talk about it, it sounds like something I do all the time, and I have done it quite a bit. That's why I only know about it.
No, thank you for clarifying that. I was a little bit confused there. Needed some
No, it is
clarification.
confusing, and it's still confusing for me. I'm still working on trying to get the most information I can for everybody. But what I wanted to do is, because this is so important to me, this past life thing, it's became kind of like a central theme to a lot of my books and how I've discovered a lot of this, and who I am now is because of these lives. So I kind of want to talk about that. So this is why I was chosen for this special project called Project Traveler. So one of my past lives, and these are the ones they saw. Um, it was 1400s. It was in Italy. So I was probably in that life, I was what they would consider something of like a psychic medium. So there was this village, and I was helping a lot of people who had lost their loved ones. They would come and, barter and trade. They would, bring vegetables and, whatever they had. And I would do that psychic medium work and let them talk to passed over loved ones and things like that. So what had happened is that the Inquisition came through. So one day these men came to my house. Somebody had told, what they had seen in the village. These men came to my house, and they punched me in the face. They dragged me away to in a wagon and took me to this dungeon, and I had to leave my 2 kids behind. And they did, a lot of different torturous methods. And one of the things I remember they did is they had me hanging from a ceiling with rope, on my arms, while they were doing a lot of things. They just left me like that a lot of times. And I actually died in that life from starvation, and dehydration. I didn't get burned at the stake or anything. It was just definitely dehydration and starvation. But what I think is interesting is that they used the things that I told them under trance as a child about this life, they used it again in the psychiatric hospital to, make sure that I had a double trauma by using ropes and things and making me hang from things, because that helps seal in that trauma and in that altar specifically. So that psychic mediumship in that life, it didn't go away. A lot of people, I can't eliminate some of the things I've been in the past. I just can't, because I'm everything that I've ever been. So it stays within the cellular level, and your body remembers a lot of that. So that's kind of how I'm able to grasp again this, kind of like psychic medium work in a way. So what was traumatic in that life too is that when I was in the dungeon, I was in bad shape. It was like almost towards the last day that I was alive, and my uncle had to take my children, and there was only like a tiny slit of a hole where we could get air coming into the dungeon area, and he brought my kids to see me because he knew this would probably be the last time. And I wish he wouldn't have done that, because I still, what's weird is I still feel guilt that he did that. I still feel the pain of him bringing the children there to see me in that state where I was hanging and, starving, and, I didn't have any clothes on or anything, probably beaten and bruised. So it's very stressful to remember that he brought those 2 children, whoever they are in this life or any other life, to have seen that, that probably traumatized them in several lives to know, that they saw their mother being, treated at, saying that I, was communing with the devil or whatever. And I never admitted to it, but I was really angry at them. I was angry at men in that life. And that's something that they used later on for altars, to be angry at men. I was angry at them for what they had done to me. All the men in the village, they had, came through and just destroyed us. They wanted to take away everything we had. So I really felt like I called out to the darkness because nothing else answered me. And I felt like if I don't, I need to be, I want this anger out there. I want it to travel. And I felt like I almost cursed myself, by saying that. But it was really interesting. But there's another life and they also use this life as something that I would be good for. So this was probably like 1800-ish, late 1700s, something like that. And I was a male in that life, and I had lived by myself a long time. My parents died really young. So even as a kid, I was kind of like a street kid or a vagabond. I traveled around a lot of different places, begging or just grabbing food or whatever I could do to survive. And in that life, there was something, I was just born with darkness in me. That was just there. Some people are just born that way. And I was born in that way in that life. And I ended up finding somebody that was like me. We both had the same darkness inside us and we traveled together. And the honesty of it, we were harming people. We would try to find somebody, particularly a woman that was out by herself. We would attack her and leave her in the fields or whatever. Because in those times, you could find, people were out, tending to their, land and their yards and things. You found people like that. And we hadn't been caught because we would just, attack someone, to the end without saying everything in detail, but I attacked them to the end and then we would leave them and we'd just go to the next village and do it, just continue that. And we kept doing it over and over. It was just something just dark was in us. That's all I can say. And so when the last day before we died, we had become careless because we didn't think, nobody could catch us. We were traveling too quickly. So we had just assaulted a young lady and we left her and they found her quickly. So that was our mistake. And me and my friend had gone to the pub and we were, having a drink or whatever, hanging out with other gentlemen in the club or the pub. And they knew it was us because we were the only new people in that town. And, this woman had been assaulted. They knew it was us. So we had to run. We ran as fast as we could. We ended up going to a barn and we thought we were safe, but they locked us in the barn and set it on fire. So, we burned alive essentially, and we deserved it. But that's another way how they used that in the psychiatric hospital. They used, fire and, hold your hand over a fire because it seals it, your body and your soul and your spirit. There's a lot inside you that remembers trauma like that, especially being burned alive. So I was able to feel that trauma again. And they used that in the psych hospital, but they also use that, that darkness. They think that you could retain that, or they could create an altar out of it to be used in different jobs in the future. So they saw that and they're like, yes, that can be usable. And then there was also oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, just to summarize real quick, in case
Yeah,
anybody's getting lost or confused. So we're dealing with here with a group of people. They have very esoteric methods. This might sound really strange to a lot of people. Okay. So what they're doing is, are they regressing you as a child or hypnotizing you and getting you to sort of go over verbally all of your past lives? Like, are they sort of,
yes.
Or how was the process so that's basically the process by which they're uncovering. So they're deliberately going into your soul history. They're locating things which they feel can be useful to them in different ways.
It was a surprise though. They were surprised at this. They didn't do this with other children. They just pretty much tortured them. So this was different. What they decided to do with me and Jacob was a surprise. They didn't know that we could go that far because, we're kids. They didn't expect, our minds to be that expansive, but we were able to open the mind that much to let them, see, into different realities. We didn't, obviously children don't know you can do that. It was a surprise to them because you don't hear, you don't always hear that from other people that were experiencing MK Ultra. It was mostly, trauma and abuse and things like that. Some did have some experiences like that. But there was a couple more lives. One of them was as a slave. And that's one of the main ones where they saw like I could be programmed because I had a slave life. So I can't even tell you the time. I really don't know the time frame. I do remember it was a lot of sand and it looked like somewhere similar like Egypt, something like that. We're building these pyramids and they were called flash pyramids, but I was a male in that life. And I just remember I don't remember having a mind. I just remember moving almost like a robot. You just keep going and going. And I remember seeing this huge being and it almost looked like what we think like Anubis looks like. And I called them the dog people. And we thought that the dog people, so this is what our story said. We said that the dog people came there and killed our God, our God was a crocodile. So we said as our people, we said the dog people came here, killed our God, and now they're in control. So these things were so powerful that one of them could control the masses. So he was just there with his staff. He didn't even say anything. He was able to control all of us, in the mind. And we just moved constantly. You didn't eat, you didn't sleep, you didn't drink anything. So we would just use us up until you just died on the stairs. And that's how I died, just on the stairs of a pyramid. And they were trying to build these pyramids so quickly. They're called flash portals. So they were just trying something to build them so quickly that we were so expendable. All the humans were just, being pushed out like expendable and just dying. And then they have new ones that do, and just constantly doing that. So in the psychiatric hospital, they saw that I could be, mind controlled because it had happened to me before. So it was still in there, that capacity to be controlled. They found it. They found what, that I could do that again.
So this is very interesting. I just want to emphasize the importance of this. This is a window into their methodology. They are using the information about past lives to guide them in their programming process. And not a lot of people have talked about this before. So this is something new that I think the community really needs to delve into and understand deeper. But getting back to the timeline.
Yeah.
Let's
So just
move
one
on
more.
from
I
that
gotta,
point.
I gotta just tell you one more, because
Okay, sure.
this is the last life, and why I was chosen for Project Traveler is because I could see myself, and it's about, I want to say, I don't know, ancient times. All I say is ancient times because I can see myself following somebody he lost one of his sheep, and he's in the dark desert and he's trying to find it, before it's completely gone. And I can sneak up behind him, and like I'm whispering in his ear, making fun of him, saying, "Where you going? What are you doing?" And he is terrified. And it's because I'm invisible. He can't see me. He can hear me, but he doesn't know what I am. So I'm following him, and I'm pretty much trying to move into that state of oppression where I can, just kind of, impress myself upon him constantly, to constantly scare him. And because in that life I was what people would consider a dark entity. I was a dark jinn in that life named Harlowin. So pretty much, my brothers, the jinn, you know, they think they're gods. But when you ask them deep down if they're in like a state of deep consciousness, we know we're not gods. We know we're something what they would consider like a lower god. And that doesn't really mean anything. It only meant something to us. And it was because we had, been worshipped so long that we thought we were gods. We had lost, that origin story of ourselves, So we were so I was doing this. That was pretty much my life. That's how I lived for thousands of years. I would, find a prey, stalk him, oppress him, and, just constantly infiltrate his life, with various methods until he allowed me to take over his body. And once I was able to take over his body, or anybody's body, I would then like, make them hurt themselves, other people, and completely destroy their lives. And, I felt like, because I was so out of tune with who I was, or maybe I was in tune, I felt like I was doing something good. I felt like I was giving them what they needed, because I felt like they called that darkness experience to them. And that's what I thought was my mission, was to give that to them. I'm here to, provide that darkness to you, as a dark entity. And I traveled, what was so cool is, well, not cool, but I say that just because I can see it in my mind. I know it sounds creepy, but it was because we could travel as energy. We didn't like traveling as physical form because it's very difficult. It's very heavy and very dense to go into that physical form. And I saw myself as a dark jinn in a physical form, and it's not what people considered something attractive, or like you would see, ooh, that looks cool. No, it's a gnarled, knotted, troll-like thing. It's not anything that I wanted. And I didn't want to repulse people. I didn't want to do that. That's why I much rather travel as energy. And when I see myself as energy, I look like a red tornado or red cloud, something like that. So it's red energy. And we traveled by blood, like a virus. So when people think about some type of entities, we didn't always, it's not what people see in the movies. And from what I experienced, is more of an energetic, viral nature. Because once we got into the bloodstream, we would jump in, and once I destroyed somebody, I'd move on to my next victim. So this is why, because they saw that, dark energy in that, jinn self, is how I got, referred to Project Traveler. So the psychiatrist at the hospital, she referred me out to another person called Dr. Green. So when I went to Dr. Green's office, it
Is
didn't
this at
really look
another
like a,
location, same psychiatric
yes.
facility, or did they move you?
She referred me out. They took me to his office. And I don't know if this is the truth. I only know him as Dr. Green, but other people think that Dr. Green is another name for Mangala. I
Yeah, and
don't know.
you hear this a lot from people, right? Encountering Dr. Mangala.
Yeah, and I only know him as Dr.
uh,
Green, but when I saw him, he was really old and he was very frail, like his skin was paper thin, he was bald everywhere. He wore these little tiny wire rimmed glasses. He was pretty frail looking. But I always say this when I describe him, like
did he
even though he
speak
looked
at
like
all?
that, yes, but his energy was like being in a cage with a tiger. Like I was still like, whoa, when I'm around him, even though he's an older man, it's still like I felt that, standoffish fear in a way. But what he did, he had these two twins there, and they had some type of albino condition, which that doesn't matter. It's just me describing it when I see it in my head. And he told them that they needed to do like kind of like an exam on me. So they started to do this weird exam, and it looked like, they opened my eyes, they were looking my ears, and then at the end they opened my mouth and looked inside my mouth. They both did. And they closed my mouth, and because they had to, open up and say ah kind of thing, and I did, and they said yes. They told Dr. Green, yes, we can see the thing inside her. So
And
what they thought,
what do you think that was?
well, I
And
know they thought,
they looked in other places in you, and then they
mhm,
looked in your mouth for it, and then so they're clairvoyant in some kind of way, I guess. I'm
must have
assuming,
been, yeah,
and they're seeing
Harlequin.
some kind of traces, if not the thing itself.
Yes,
And
they saw Harlequin.
what do you think that was? Oh, they saw. Okay.
They saw Harlequin, the
And
djinn that I used to be, the
and
dark
so do you
entity, the
think?
demon.
And so, are you sure that the jinn was you, or
Yes.
because I know it can get confusing, when you have attachments to where, you're kind of a hybrid at that point,
Yeah.
and I think you
And
can
this is
kind of
why I can,
access there.
yeah, that's why I can
Mhm.
that's why I can connect to these things. Why they sought me out my whole life is because I'm one of them. And that's exactly what they tell me. When I speak to demonic entities or dark entities or, things like that, they say, and they never harm me because why would they? I am one of them. They don't need to do that. They don't need to take over me. I'm one of them. It's never happened, never will happen. I have no fear of it because I am already one of them. What would be the point of trying to attach themselves to me? Have I had some that I've allowed to scoot in and take over for a little bit? Probably, yeah, because I'm one of them. And if they feel, a certain way, I don't feel any
You,
fear when I do it.
you're one of them, but yet your nature now is
Yes.
dissimilar from
Yes.
what they are normally characterized
And
as.
I find that very conflicting. Trust me,
Yeah.
I've felt conflicted by that because I consider myself, just in my opinion, I thought I was a good person. And I do think I'm a good person. I try to help people, but I'm also that thing. And I cannot eliminate it. And nor do I want to now. Now that I know who I was, and I don't know anybody that can eliminate a past life. If somebody knows how to do it, let me know. But it was at the cellular level. Why would I want to take something away that was part of like my full experience? I became that as a role, and I've learned so much just from listening to Harlequin talk about how she took on this role to help other people, to give them darkness because they didn't know what darkness was. They needed to learn. She's so extensive in the way she speaks about how she's taught people about darkness and what they, what how it can, impact the world itself, and to help people learn about it, and to go a different way. Exactly what they say is that you will never know. If you push away the darkness, you won't know how far the light can expand. That's what they've told me. So it's all
That's
necessary
what
in that term of do it.
who
The
told you that?
A lot of different entities like Lady Death, even like Jesus and Mary talk about the same thing, like that duality
And
is
they said what again?
common
Repeat
to
that
us.
line. Repeat the line that they said. Sorry.
If you don't, know the darkness, you will never be able to know how far the light can expand.
And that's coming from the dark entities themselves, and they
And Jesus and Mary. And
so,
I just want
yeah.
to say, I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in organized religion, and I don't know why, because some people think that I only talk to demons. No, I can pretty much host anything, animals, spirits, demonic entities, religious figures, whoever wants to come forth,
Mhm.
I can let them take over my body. And I don't know why they've chosen me, aliens too. I don't know why they choose me if I'm not a religious person to speak through me. I can't answer that. Somebody would have to ask them themselves. So it's really interesting that they would choose somebody like me to bring messages through to this world.
Yeah, and it's also really interesting to me personally that they would hold a particular philosophy which seems to acknowledge the benefit to spiritual growth that the darkness provides. Um,
That's
but
not even
anyway,
the that is
yeah.
not even the coolest the most interesting, strange thing that I've heard a demon say is that they worship God. That they've literally said, "We worship God too. Why do you think you're the only ones that get this experience? We have our own God that we worship. You know, you're
Yeah.
not the only people that have a belief system." They say they all because all these are like races of beings. You know, when we're thinking of demonic, in my experience, what I've seen is that they're just like the jinn. We're a race of beings. You know, I have brothers that, you know, and there's a hierarchy, they have their own ways. So it's so different than what people have been able to experience because I get to experience it directly and to see it, you know, in a different way than other people, you know, besides what people see on TV or what they've been, you know, learned through different books or religion or things like that. I get to see it differently. So it's a different experience that I have.
We will have to, in another podcast, dive into that deeply.
Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, it's really interesting. So I was
Yeah.
gonna expand on Traveler. So once they found that, they used that for a long time. So when they took me back to the psychiatric hospital, they had, you know, decided that they wanted to because they were so excited about this. They didn't even really know what they were doing. They thought that I had an attachment. They thought that they could control this thing inside me. They thought it was really like I was possessed and I had an attachment. That's what they thought. And they were wrong because it wasn't attachment, it was me. It was really me that they were looking at. So they ended up after this even seeking out, and they still do seek out possessed people or possessed children to do this kind of work. You
But
know,
why would the attachment, or you as a past jinn, or however you want to call it, why would that be beneficial to the applications which they wanted you for?
because the government uses the occult more than anybody can think of, more than you know, because there's power. Imagine the power behind the dark side that nobody's been able to harness. They're after it, and there's a lot of different
As
agencies,
far as
not just the
psychic,
government.
as far as like psionic power, is there some kind of
I can't
maybe?
even explain the power.
Uh,
I've seen it, but there's no way to really explain it in words. You have to. I've been to the outer realms. I saw a door there and there's a gate there. I didn't pass through it, but I've seen it, and it's just something beyond what I can even explain. Is there's power behind, and that's what they're trying to harness, is that power. So some of the entities told me that, well, Isis is one of them, and I know she's made a comeback and people think that she's like this lovely angelic being, but from what she told me, she said that, yes, she said, I'm an angel, but I'm an angel of darkness, and thank you for bringing me back to life, you know, with this newfound worship. It helps them stay alive, because if they don't have people to worship them, the old gods, they call themselves the elder gods, they said that they will die out if they don't have worshipers. So when somebody loses their worshipers, they're dying. You know, I was able to talk to one of these demonic entities called the Abyss. He was so old, he couldn't even remember his own name. He was so old, and he said he was dying. I had allowed him to attach to me through my liver, and he was just stuck in there and just hiding and scared because he said, I don't have anybody. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't, you know, there was a big, huge, you know, fiasco. He didn't know what to do. He was terrified. He said, I'm so old, I don't even know what my name is. I don't have any worshipers. I'm going to die if I leave. So it was really, you know, I think he was really stressed out that he had lost that part of himself. So these old entities think that, you know, they think they're gods because of their being worshipped, and they're pretty much, they call themselves a dying race. But now Isis, she's making a comeback, and she's, you know, the angel of darkness, and there's a lot of ritualistic things going on in worship of her. She told me that in the beginning there was a barrier placed between their world and ours, and she said that's where that old legend comes from. They think it comes from vampires, but she said no, it comes from me. That they have to be invited into your space. She said that comes from the old gods because they do have to be invited. And I know that because when I was a dark jinn, that I had to be let inside to take over the person. So it is like being invited, like that vampire legend.
That's interesting. Okay, so getting back to the timeline, you're with Dr. Green.
Yes.
He's excited by the fact
Yes.
that you've got this thing. He's visibly excited. Did he say anything in particular about this or what you were going to be used for? Or take the
No.
story from there.
They don't tell me anything because I was a little kid.
Yeah.
But when I got back to they took me back to the psychiatric hospital, and they were very excited because they wanted to start some new kind of scientific process to see if because they wanted to see if there's some type of way to make this measurable, the paranormal. So they're still doing that. We just don't know about it. If you look on, different websites that are 3-letter agencies, you can find some old information if you really look really deep. But so they had me do like this sensory deprivation type thing. So I'm in a dark room. There was no water or anything like that. I was in a dark room, just in pajamas, hooked up to an IV. They had me sit there for I don't even know how many days, and they guided me into a trance. So when I did this trance, I was able to allow these dark entities to take over my body, and that's what they wanted to see. And then they would come and do like body systems measurements, and a lot of observation, and what I would say when they were inside my body, and do things like that. And it was a very conflicting thing to
What,
see what this was happening, because the humans were torturing me. They had been torturing me, and I was staying alive because the demons were keeping me alive. They were sustaining me while they were in my body, because they wouldn't give me food or anything. I couldn't do anything, but the demonics were keeping me alive, and the humans were the ones torturing. So you can imagine in somebody's mind how conflicting that is. I'm supposed to hate these things because religion tells me to hate them, but it's the humans that are hurting me. I didn't understand that. So, it's been very conflicting to see that in my, mind's eye of what had happened.
and do you think one of the things that they were doing was that they were communicating with these entities and maybe obtaining information from them
Yes,
potentially?
absolutely. Because I can do that now. If I let an entity take over and speak, I can do that now. They give that's how I've gotten a lot of information. And then you can just tell them, hey, I know you're the all-knowing type. Tell me, about this. Do you know anything about this? And they love to spill their guts because they love to talk, because how often do they get a chance to step into our dimension? If it weren't for people like me that know how to do it, they're ready to talk. They talk about all kinds of things. So in the beginning, this happened and this happened. It's very interesting to hear what they speak about.
Yeah. If they love to talk so much, would they be open to having a conversation on a podcast? Have you ever done that, or have you ever?
No,
Anyone
I
ever
haven't,
asked?
because I know it would terrify people. I haven't done it because the way they
Because,
speak is
yeah.
it's I'm used to it, and it doesn't scare me, and it doesn't scare
So
my.
your personality totally changes, and you're
It's not me. It's not me speaking.
right.
So,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
not you. It's not you. But from seemingly, it seems like from the outside perspective that you have an entirely different personality
Yeah,
and
and it
tone of
uses
voice and everything.
my voice, but there's just, and it's unpredictable. Sometimes they'll come and they'll have a personality that's very relaxed, and then there'll be somebody else that's very seductive. Then there's somebody else that just wants to sexually harass, the hypnotherapist or the person that's helped me go into trance. There's so many different ways. Some have been very helpful and just, been really chill, and it's just like humans. There's so many different personalities. I could never say,
And there's
that
no way to
this
sort
was
of
going to be, there's never been a way for me to say who's evil, who's not. I can't even make that decision, because it's all subjective and based on somebody's personal experience and personal belief systems. I personally can't say that they were harmful to me, because they haven't been. And in a way, sometimes they protected me. So, and because they say they protect me because I'm kindred, I'm one of them. They said, you are our people. We know who our people are. We come to protect you. That's happened to me before, where I've gone under hypnosis, and there's a particular, I don't have a lot of problems with entities. There was one that was a succubus, that she kept kind of appear because she was attracted to somebody that I was dating, and she was not happy about that. So she kept trying to, place herself. Whenever I went into trance, she would show up and try to like choke me astrally or something. And I saw one time that I felt, I felt it like you feel like you don't think that it feels real. It does. The astral energy feels real. So when she was trying to choke me, I must have like called out to something in my mind. And there's a particular entity that's very close to me. His name is Bacchus. And I literally heard like a thunder of like 100 buffalo come. It was like bulls. I felt like, charging bulls. And he came like in that form as like a bull, and kind of like, she just kind of like skirted away. That succubus thing kind of skirted away. Like she saw Bacchus come running. And it's because he said he's been so connected to me in the past that he can't allow this. And if I call, he'll come, and he was one of the first entities that kind of made himself known to me without me going into trance, which is kind of like a big deal to me, that I didn't reach out to the darkness to speak to him. He came to me. He said, pretty much there's a particular tagline he has like in his mind. The way what I call a tagline is because the way you call, they all have a different call. Like he had a specific call that he wanted, and he would put it in my mind over and over. And then,
what do you mean by call? What is that exactly?
I don't, because people get scared if I say this stuff. So I'm trying to simplify it. It's a particular, if you say his name a certain amount of times, that's a call for him. Like, I don't want to say too much, but
right.
That scares people. Like, it's a particular call to him. So I could get him to show up whenever, because he thinks he considers him my father. He considers himself my dark father. He calls himself my father. He said he's not going to let anybody hurt me or anything. If I call him, he'll come rushing. I know it's crazy. I get
it. Todd, as far as like your position as a paranormal investigator, I wonder what could be gained as far as insight and understanding into ghosts and hauntings. You know what I mean? I mean, what I mean. And
I know the most important thing is that when the fear drops away, they have less to control us with in this world. If I stop being afraid of this, when I stopped being afraid of this, it was a whole new world for me, because I was terrified of this my whole life. I was terrified of anything paranormal. I was terrified of possessed movies, phobias of all this. So when that fear drops away, when we're learning about this stuff, and it's not as scary now that you know the details of it, that fear drops away. The world, whoever's in charge in this world, they can't control us as much with this gone. With the fear lessening, it's less control.
Yeah, and that's absolutely what we need to do, is just completely reconcile with the fearful elements. And once you just accept it, and change your relationship towards it, it becomes something different than fear at that point. It's no longer the same energy. But anyway, so why don't we get back on to Project Traveler, or what happened in the timeline after the point of the Dr. Mangala.
I was going to jump up to, sometimes I jump up because there's a little bit of a missing time between 7 and 13. I mean, there was certain things that I did, but, in terms of what they consider, I don't know, trafficking of children, some things like that, I really don't talk about that too much. It's a little bit in my book, but I try not to focus on that too much. But sometimes I jump to age 13, and which is very significant time for me, because in age 13, they took me to do a different type of training. And where they took me to was what really started to blow my mind when I was seeing this, is that they took me to the moon. So when I was taken to the, and it sounds crazy, but you have no idea what there is going. So there's so much going on behind the scenes that us as normal people have never been aware of. They have technology, they have bases, they have so much that we have never been aware of, and they will not make us aware until people like us keep talking about it and making it more rational, and people start to believe that, this happens. So it's really weird because I remember being with this older gentleman. He was like in a suit. He was wearing a hat and everything, and he just
Is
took me
this is
with
this
him.
is this on the train or is this
Yeah,
before?
it took me on a train, and it looked like a subway train. That's why I was like, I wouldn't have been afraid because it looked like a train. You know, I don't know what it was. But when I got there, they took us to this underground base in the moon. And I knew it was the moon. And when I was remote viewing it, I could even see like when I went to, there was a specific classroom that they wanted me to go to. So I got in the classroom and I tried to
Well,
remote view the
but
classroom. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
before we get to that, I
Yeah.
just want to, for anybody who's like, oh no, come on, you took a train to the moon.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. Now, so they do have this technology. Okay. Look into Tony Rodriguez. Okay. Which very compelling testimony from that guy. He's clearly not making this stuff up. He did not get to the moon by train, but when he was on Mars, he got to Ceres from Mars by train. He was on a type of train, okay, or a maglev rail system of some kind,
Yes. Like a subway. Yep.
and he describes, it's obviously uh, a vehicle of some sort, that's train like that's going through some kind of Stargate or some kind of wormhole or whatever it is, a Tesla teleportation device. They've got some kind of setup, and he can describe the moment where he was on the train and something happened. And I can't remember how he describes it specifically, but there was a kind of change in awareness, and you felt like something weird had occurred. And then there were these kind of strange sort of protocols that as soon as they got onto Ceres, they just wound up on Ceres from Mars, which is an asteroid, if anyone is confused about this. It's a large asteroid in the asteroid belt, or more like a planetoid, small planet. They had them immediately, they forced them all to drink water because whatever device they went through, some kind of teleportation device, you would get really sick or something negative physiologically would happen to you if you did not hydrate yourself immediately. So he describes, some kind of weird sort of technology they had that was like a train that took him through some kind of portal, and they wound up on another planetary body elsewhere in the solar system. And this does exist. But anyway, go on with when you got to
Yes.
the moon.
And I wouldn't be, I was a kid, so I probably would have been less aware than him of some of those, different details because, especially having altars and stuff. And I had a chaperone. I didn't go by myself. I had a chaperone that took me, a man. So when I got to the base, there was a little dorm room. Like I said, I just went in there and I went to class every day, and I was going there specifically for psionics training. And they didn't really want me in the class because it was all adults. I was the youngest person to go through that class. And what they were trying to train me to be is personality profiling because they wanted me to be really good at that for future work. So the teacher I had, she was like, looked like she was in her 20s, but I swear like her demeanor and her energy was like an older person, like in her 50s. It was so weird to see some of these younger people that, I don't know. It's really strange. The way people act and look, it was really mixed up and it's hard to explain. But what I wanted to say is when I went into the classroom, it looked like an older college classroom. No windows or anything though, just kind of like, I don't know, like painted stone. And on one of the walls, there was a poster there, and it said I remember there's a specific general named General Land, Land, and that he was retiring from 20 years of service, and they were having a banquet for him. So I remembered seeing that poster, and that's kind of like in my mind's eye of remembering that he was the general on that base when I was there, General Land. So what I was doing is, and in this particular classroom, the teacher was very tough on me. She didn't want me there, but she had to take me because in my file, there's a stamp supposedly that says, I'm a special sector type person. So you have to train me, and be good at it. So she was very hard on me, but now I appreciate what she was trying to do because I can remember so much of the stuff she said, and she was trying to keep me alive because of the work I was going to have to do is very difficult and very, dangerous. And I remember exactly, she told me, you have to be so quick and so good that it would take one look and one word. You have to be able to read that person. You have to know if they're dangerous, if they're a threat, everything. one handshake, one movement of the eye. You have to be that quick. It was so detailed in learning
And,
personality.
and how did she train you specifically how to do that? Like what did she tell you to pick up on? Was it more of a psychic reading thing, or was she instructing you to
There's so much.
recognize
It
facial
would
expressions?
it would
Or
take like forever to talk about every single little thing, because literally you can,
Mhm.
if you, all you have to do is breathe a certain way and you can detect it. You breathe a certain way, your arm reaches out for a handshake a certain way, your body language, the way
and
you move, the way even the when you're talking, you can read in between the sentences. It sounds crazy, but that's how detailed they get and how strong they want your ability to be, is that when you're talking, I can read you just by the hesitation before the
and
next thing.
and did they do anything to enhance you in order to have that kind of sensitivity? Because normally you would think that we just don't kind of possess the kind of conscious awareness to sort of notice all these things. But what was the process by which?
You don't think
Uh,
that people have that ability, but then there are people
mm,
out there that we're already trained to have certain things like I do already, like hosting, remote viewing, that kind of thing. That not every
so
13-year-old is walking around with that type of experience.
at this point, did they already have alters
Yes,
programmed into you that
yes,
were kind of prepared and primed for this kind of training?
absolutely. I mean, it takes a long time for alters to be fully developed, because just like a regular personality, you have to fully develop it. But they were there, and that's how I was able to do. She wanted to train me for this work. They didn't even use me for the work until I was older, because I mean, I looked really young when I was 13. I looked like I was 9. So what they wanted me to do with it, I couldn't use that until I was older anyway. But they wanted it done. I got done, and pretty. I think I was only there for, I don't know, a few months. I don't remember being there a long time, but they got what they wanted. They got the results they wanted, and I became, I was a success from that. And I actually did that work in the
And
future
that's
on
and
Mars.
that's what they called psionics. So they call that,
Yeah, they called
right,
that psionics training. Yes, and
and
it was
that
personality profiling. There was other people in the class that did other stuff, but I don't understand what they could do with their abilities. There's people that talk to animals. There was energy readers. There was somebody that sounds this sounds really creepy, but he would leak moisture from his hands and body. He could, and it wasn't just like, normal sweat. It was like literally leaking moisture from his, I don't know what you can do with that ability. I have no clue.
yeah,
But I'm sure
that's
they were trying to, maybe they're trying to focus it a certain way. Who knows? But
that's very confusing. Yeah, what on
mhm,
earth were they doing with that person?
I
And
have no idea.
he
Or
was in the
maybe
same, and so these people were in the sort of same classroom, but
mhm.
sort of sectioned off, or were they being instructed differently by a different person?
I know she
Or
gave me a lot of one-on-one attention, because even now I can look and I can see her hair kind of like leaning over me when I'm at my desk. She's talking to me kind of very stern, like, you know,
right,
just she
or
was very firm with me. Like I said, I appreciate it now because I could see that, looking, I probably took it hard because I was a kid then, but she was trying to keep me alive because of the dangerous work I'd have to do. She knew I had to be good at this. She knew I had to be quick. Because if you're doing gray mouse work, you have to be quick. You have to get in and out. You have to be able to read the rooms. Every room you go into, you have to be able to read the people in that room, because there's always going to be a threat somewhere if you're doing work like this. It's very dangerous work.
and I think where a lot of people get hung up, when they listen to these kind of testimonies and people doing all this kind of espionage kind of work, and they think, well, this person doesn't sound like, a real. You have to understand, though, that these alters are the ones that are trained for this, and if you still have that alter in you, which you may somewhere, and we could speak to that alter, he would know, to find detail, everything,
I've done it. It's in my
have
book.
all that knowledge.
I've
Yeah,
actually done it, and the
have
details are in the book if anybody wants to have expansive knowledge of
you
what
you
I
you
said
so
while
so
I was
you
profiling.
you brought that alter out, and that alter
Yes,
contributed to
yes, a
that
lot.
part of the book.
Yeah, they told everything about what they did, how they did it, every move they had to make going in a building, every move. And
And
it was
and I
so
and
detailed,
I
it was
think
insane.
right, and I think if you could switch to that altar now, which I don't want you to do or anything, people would notice, "Oh my god, this does feel like, the type of person that really, is capable, to do those kind of things,"
But if I'm gonna be
Uh,
good, you would never know. If I'm good at this, you'd never
yeah,
know.
true.
You would
Yeah,
want me to
yeah,
be naive. You would want me to look like I didn't know what I'm doing. That's the point
right.
of it. That's the point of
And
it.
I
You
and
would
I'm not
never
saying I
know.
And I'm not saying you
Yeah.
come off as naive or anything, but I think there's a general sort of perception of people when they listen to these kind of testimonies that that seems unbelievable for that reason. But
And I tell them that's the point.
mhm,
That's why they trained me like this, to be undetectable. Because the way I'm speaking right now, you would never know that I could have done the things that I had done. You would never know. They would never see me coming, and they never did. They never knew that it was me if I went in a building. If I had to dress up like as a maid or somebody working in the building, they never knew what I was there for. That's why I was a success at it. That's why they had me do it. It's because I was that good at it. Because, you have to get in, get out, and create this persona that they would never detect as somebody as a threat.
mhm,
Who would
yeah,
see, like, who would even detect, like, some woman going into, as somebody cleaning a building or something, and like, they would never think that that's the bad guy, that's the person,
right,
trying to steal the information. They'd never know, and they never did.
right. Okay, so
Yes.
after that period of training, what happens from that point then?
I started doing a lot of when I was older. I have like a missing chunk from like 13 to 19 because I was really young, like I said, and they really couldn't, they wanted to use me for more adult things, if you know what I mean. And I couldn't be used, and I wasn't really used for that until I was a little bit older. They wanted me to do beta tracking work, what I call beta tracking work. And that is
I always
pretty
find
much, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Before we get into that, the other things that you're talking about, more sort
Yes.
of illicit things, I always find that strange, that they sort of have this multifaceted purpose for these assets, as those kinds of things on the one end, and then corporate espionage on the other end, and that's funny, I mean, that's just kind of, you would think that ordinarily, that you would be specifically tasked for, what you were trained for, but yet I'm not saying I disbelieve this. This is just how they do
Mhm.
things, you're all these things, and yet you're still a project monarch uh, slave in that sense.
They
I don't know
use
if
they
you want to.
use you up. They literally use you up till you have
Yeah,
nothing left. And then you become like this thing that in later in life where you don't know who you are. You have all these leftover alters, all these weird memories. They use you up until you become this thing that doesn't even know who you are. Like I didn't know who I was. So it, it's
yeah,
to me
they-
I had the same feeling like when I started to get all these memories and working on these things. I'm a human. I had the same questions that every person would have, the same doubts, the same, I'm pretty much like, what the hell? Where is this coming from? And, at the same time, I was getting memories. I was getting, V2K and things like that because I was so close. They knew I was close. Whoever was in control knew how close I was to kind of cracking open, that part of my mind to get these memories. They knew the closer I got to it, and the more threatening they became, telling me, one time I remember they literally told me I was practicing meditation because that was how I started getting closer to memories. And I could get conscious recall just by slowing my mind down. I could get conscious
Hmm,
recall, like huge
hmm,
loads of it. And
excellent.
I
Yeah,
heard the mental, and it's not an auditory hallucination. I want people to distinguish when I'm talking about what I call as V2K is a mental message. I don't hear it auditory. So people think that if you're hearing messages, you're schizophrenic. Schizophrenia usually is associated with auditory hallucinations. I wasn't experiencing auditory hallucinations. It was more of a mental message. And during these times of meditation, I literally heard through a mental message, they said, if you come any closer, we're going to take everything from you. And they weren't kidding. They said, if I kept, going towards memories, that I was going to be, targeted or harmed in some way. They didn't want me to get that way because I think maybe they could tell that I was going to get to this point where I could have so much information to give to people. They didn't, they wanted to stop that.
yeah. Just to come back to the case of Kathy O'Brien again. When they delved into her and hypnotically regressed her, they found bank information and all kinds of stuff, really sensitive information, which the ex-CIA guy who was uh, trying to help her immediately decided, I've got to take this to the FBI because, they're going to kill us, That's what people don't understand, with MK Ultra assets. And I was actually explaining this to a previous guest. It's a bit dangerous, when you go looking into these compartments, because you might find stuff that are things that they really want to keep secret, that they cannot afford to have out there. And so, there is that. But anyway, yeah. So go on.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to come to. I have that Kathy O'Brien clip that I think.
Sure. Wherever you want to head it.
Todd, why don't you play that clip, and then you can speak a little bit about the photographic memory and the kind of capability of the mind control programming and how that can enhance visual acuity and memory. So as far as like espionage work, real quick before you press play, Todd, they obtain the information from you by regressing you. They don't sit you down and I think debrief you in the normal fashion, right?
No, because that's too easy for anybody. You have to go, if you want the information, it's buried deep. That's what they train us for, to bury the information because that's needed in case you get caught, you get interrogated.
Right.
If they interrogate me, like with my front personality, I have no clue. But all they would have to do, if they had somebody skilled to put me in a trance, which it's so easy for me to fall in a trance. It'd be so easy now that I'm so practiced at it, they could get to that easy if they wanted to debrief.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, go ahead and play that clip, Todd. I think our viewers will find this interesting.
At that time, there's a criminal faction of our government that was interested in targeting children such as myself for mind control, because this compartmentalization of memory was something that they deemed ideal for keeping government secrets. After all, if I couldn't think to remember, how could I tell about it? Additionally, people who suffer from dissociative identity disorder develop a photographic memory behind those amnesic barriers, because the brain has a defense mechanism that when trauma occurs, it photographically records events surrounding trauma. And an example of this would be that many of you who are old enough to remember, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, most people know exactly where they were and what they were doing, because this was an event that traumatized the nation. And this exemplifies how the mind photographically records events surrounding trauma. So behind these amnesic barriers, I had a photographic memory, which the government deemed ideal for programming. That way I could deliver messages to and from government leaders, or in my case, also drug lords, who were involved in funding the black budget and funding the New World Order controls. They're interested in programming me so that I would deliver the messages verbatim. When I delivered messages, I delivered exactly what I was told, using the voice inflections of my abusers, with no conscious comprehension of what I was even saying. It was just a tape recorder just parroting out exactly what I'd been told. Another aspect that the government was interested in is that as a dissociative identity disordered person, I had no concept of time, because I was going from compartment to compartment of my brain with no memory of what had happened before. Therefore, I had no ability to even keep track of time, and a concept of it was just absolutely impossible. And it also makes for, if I didn't know what I was doing earlier, I wouldn't know to be tired while I was overdoing something else. Therefore, a person who suffered from dissociative identity disorder had extensive physical endurance, just superhuman strength and ability to keep going and going and going and going. Dissociative identity disorder persons also develop 44 times visual acuity. Very often that's why you see them wide-eyed with the whites around their eyes, because they're actually taking in more of their surroundings than the average person. 44 times more detail than the average person sees. That certainly makes them perfect marksmen for mercenary operations or for intelligence. in different areas that the government was interested in developing mind control.
So that seems a bit familiar. I'm assuming,
Yes.
doesn't it?
Yeah, of course. Yep. I do have one altar that does that. And they used me, like I said, this was something I did called beta tracking work. And this was not my favorite work, but it was somewhat more on the easy side, in my opinion, is because they had something called Black Widow programming. And it's just, if they want you to be in a relationship, you'd be in a relationship. They want you to infiltrate someone's life, you infiltrate their lives. And it's all in the matter of intelligence gathering. Sometimes you're just hanging out with this person. Sometimes you're in a relationship with this person. You're dating this person just to be around them, to record. There's an altar in the back recording what they're doing, what they're saying. You're seeing things that are recorded, and sometimes you don't have to, they can't catch you really, because it looks like you're just hanging out in the house. You're somebody's girlfriend who, they don't know. They can't tell that you're the one taking in all their information. They've never been able to tell. Those people hardly ever get caught doing that, because it's so far deep inside you that they have no idea. You could be in a relationship for a whole year that you're told to do, and they would never even know. And then you break up like a normal person, and they just debrief you and take all the information that they needed from your brain. So it's really interesting, yeah, that she said all that. That's, kind of exactly, there's a lot of passages in my book about different programs that I had to do that infiltrate somebody's life and kind of record what's going on behind me. A lot of people, and sometimes a lot of it happened during, like, I don't know, where they had hired you for some type of, sexual activity or something. And people get very comfortable when they think they can control you, and, in those situations, and they talk very openly during that. That's the point, that when they're talking, you're recording it, whatever they're saying. There's so many times you can read between the lines too. So it's really interesting.
And so in some sense, I mean, you are just like a human sort of recording device.
Yeah, they put you in that. And in certain ways, they have you do that. Unless they wanted you to do something else. If you were working for like she says, one of the mercenary groups, there may be a different outcome that they would want achieved, if you know what I mean. So, it just depends on what group has hired you at that time, because you're mainly controlled by the government, but there's these subcontracting agencies that are able to take charge of you. They pay to use you for a certain amount of time or whatever. There's subcontractors. Some are mercenary groups, like they're saying, and most of them are private intelligence groups. So I had jobs for both private intelligence and mercenary groups, and also some more of the occult groups like Monarch Solutions. They use a lot of the occult in their work.
And so Project Monarch and Monarch mind control victims, that isn't just about sex slaves, right? I think some people have
No, I've seen it. It's based in that. I had that training, but a lot of, from what I've seen, they were using it in the occult too. So, and that's how I got into they used me for hosting for other people, and what I consider probably like elites. They purchased this. They used their attorney to purchase this service. They called it, they knew that I could do hosting. So they would hire, some of these elites would hire, maybe me and another person. They'd go to the house, and they treat you very well. They have you go there for like a weekend or something. They feed you, treat you well. You have a good place to sleep. And then during what they consider like their rituals, they have you come out. Sometimes you're clothed, sometimes you're not. And, based on wanting to be unclothed to do this work, but, you have to do what they want, whatever. But, and then I do the hosting for them. I allow whatever they want to take over my body. And so this is how I got connected to Bacchus in the past, because it was a particular family. I even know the name of the family. I won't say it here, but I was hired. And like I said, when we're hired, it's not like I'm personally hired. We're slaves. We're slaves to this system. We don't get paid. We don't get any compensation.
Yeah.
You're a slave. You're told to do this. The people that are buying you out, or like selling you, are the ones that get paid. We don't get anything from this. We're forced to do this. We're slaves. So they told me I had to go stay at this house, and I went there. I knew what it was for, hosting. So this family, they had found this connection. What they call this a familiar daemon. They don't see demon. I hardly ever even say that. I say daemon because that's what the word that they taught me.
That's the word that they always use. They never say demon. They say daemon.
Yeah, they always say daemon.
Experience.
That's why I never say demon, really. It sounds weird when I say daemon. So this family had found this particular daemon, Bacchus, in like 1536 or something. So it's a generational spirit that has gone through the line with them. So they felt like when they first contacted this entity, they felt like he's the one that keeps them in power and keeps them rich and able to, make their businesses successful. So they continue these rituals yearly in order to maintain that connection to Bacchus, because they feel, and they're going to continue this until the next generation and next generation. That's their plan, because they think that's how they stay in power and, have money and financial power, is because of him. But Bacchus told me he doesn't do anything for them. He said that's just because they were born into money. So, they just worship him for, pretty much. He says, I don't know why they say that. I have nothing to do with it. So this time they had me go to the house and they wanted to, this was their yearly ritual or whatever. It's really expensive, I guess. I don't know. I want to say, if I'm remembering right, if I'm looking at it, it looks like it's $230,000 for a weekend to do this. I don't know if that's real. That's just the number that I had. So
wow,
they had me go there for the weekend, and I would do the hosting. And sometimes, and this particular day, there was another gentleman there. He was, unclothed, and they wanted him to do it too. But me, I was good at it. There's other people that can do this, but when I did it, I let Bacchus take over my body. And they wanted, I think they want a different experience. They watch a lot of movies. So when I did it, I remember he was inside me and they wanted me to stand up and walk around. And I felt like there was like 100 extra pounds on each leg. I could barely move because I let him take over my whole physical being too. I just totally exited and let him do it. And he went to the table and they wanted to eat dinner with their God. They wanted to spend time with their God. They had Bacchus, and what they had food for me, and I tore into it like a disgusting animal. I was just like ripping and tearing the food. Like I wasn't in there. So it was like animalistic, because,
right.
If Bacchus comes here, he wants to experience the full thing. He wants to experience, physicality. So he started ripping and tearing the food, and they looked like they were disgusted. He doesn't like that because he was pissed off, because he said, you called me here and, you got these, pretty much got these looks on your faces. He's like, I'm a god. You called me here, And then they were asking him ridiculous questions. They were treating him like he was a 2-bit psychic. Like they were asking him, is my husband cheating on me? How we make more money? How do we do this? He was so upset. So this particular family are kind of on the outs with Bacchus. He told me, he said he pretty much done with them. He's like, I don't even want them as, connected to me, because they don't know how to, worship properly. He said in the old days, they knew how to pay reverence. They would bring these huge bounties out to the field at night and leave them for you and worship you and sing and dance. And now these people are just ridiculous. All I got was a meal, and, that they're just doing silly stuff. So he wasn't really happy about that, but that's kind of the thing that they wanted us to do.
So they just they just wanted to spend time with them. Basically, they weren't trying to obtain any kind of knowledge that he had or anything. They spent $250,000 just to have the company of that,
and they're also, these people are a bunch of weirdos that are doing these things because they think they call this. They're also trying to create what they consider children of the moon. So this is just the theory that they have. They think that if me or the gentleman are able to host the entity in our body, and somebody has intercourse with that person, and that person somehow creates a child, they feel like that's a demonic bloodline. They feel like that's Bacchus's child. That's his child.
And,
so they're creating
and is that child bestowed with something out of the ordinary?
They might have a special place in their family if they feel like that child was conceived through that. So they think they're creating their own army of like Antichrist that way, And Bacchus he does maintain a connection with what he considers his children, because he considers me his child, because he thinks that he was in my father's body when I was conceived. He told me that he thinks that's what happened. And it's my father was into some interesting things, but he was part of the programs too. Who knows what training he went through as a youth? I don't really know all of it, because he's been gone for so long. I can't say for sure, but that's what Bacchus told me. The
Why?
actual came from his mouth. He said that he considers himself my father and that I'm one of the children of the moon.
So it seems like they like to come to the physical dimension.
Yes.
Why is it? Why are they drawn to coming here though? Or
It's like a playground for them.
so
When
there's
I was a Gen, I loved it too. It was my favorite. That's all I lived for, is being able to come here and like infiltrate, these humans. And I thought that's what life was about for us, because that was, that's how we sustain ourselves, is by this worship, by people considering us to be gods. That's how we lived. Now the entities told me that the gods are dying because we don't need those gods anymore. Because if you want a monster in your life, the monster's next door. There's sociopaths, psychopaths, they're next door to you. They said that we're dying, the gods are dying, because they don't need our type of evil anymore. They have their own. Humans are the evil, they have their own evil now. And so that's why the gods are dying. That's what they told me. So I thought that was really interesting concept, that they say that, the monster's next door now. It's not in your dreams anymore. He's living right next to you.
Yeah, I guess
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's true. I wanted to get into Mars and stuff, but we've only got 15 minutes, so maybe we'll come to that in another podcast.
Sure. Yeah, it sounds great.
Any questions you have, Todd, about demon hosting or anything like that, coming from the paranormal perspective?
No, it's just all very fascinating. Talking about the jinn and things like that in coordination with the MK Ultra stuff. It's for me, it's a first to hear that. So yes, very intriguing.
There's a very big connection that people aren't even aware of, that they're really researching the dark side, and they're saying it's just research, but it's more than research. They're actually utilizing, and there's various agencies that are doing this. They're pretty much trying to rip a hole into some of these dimensions to get access to this, and they're gonna go insane. There's I did it one time for an agency. They wanted to reach this outer realm, and I warned them. I said, if you go too far, you're literally gonna go insane. This is not a barrier to be crossed by us humans. This just is what it is. We're not meant to cross that barrier, and it will drive, somebody like me, I can get close, but I won't go past that door. I've seen the door, and I'm not going to go past it. I don't know. People think they're bold enough to do it, but there's agencies though that are really trying that, because think about the power there, especially in that unknown piece of a dimension. It's like a dimensional. What is back there? That's what they want to see. They want to go there.
Yeah, I have many questions about this aspect. I've been a paranormal investigator for 30 years, going on 31 years, and I've never heard it being crossed over into government, PSYOP things and stuff like that. So it's definitely something I'm going to research into a little more to see what that connection is. I've definitely heard from another person about it. So yes.
12. Majestic 12.
Yes. And, it's just one of those things where when we're talking about these different government things and all these different dimensions and layers that are in these types of things, it really doesn't surprise me that, these elites are working with all these different entities and UFOs, aliens, things like that. So
Power's power. They're going to get it wherever they can.
Exactly.
And knowledge is power. I mean,
Yes.
for one thing, I mean, I think I mean, I think this is really multifaceted, but I think one piece of this is that they're they're obtaining knowledge, from these beings about, they know more about reality than we do, and there is a lot of power that comes with that knowledge. What else do you think in terms of the information that they're bringing over? What else are they learning, and what other sort of benefits aside from knowledge of reality are they getting, you think?
They think they're getting, like I said, they think they're getting information that keeps them financially in power. And I do want to say that I did
Mhm.
see one entity that there's an elite group that they have one entity chained behind a gate, but he's not really chained. So I think that's weird that he allows himself to be chained for the tricks and games of it. It's a very elder god. I don't know if you know him, called Leviathan. So he was behind this huge gate and he was back there and he plays this game. He's like, please, like, set me free, get the key and set me free. But he's something like him is not able to be chained behind a gate by a
That's
few humans. That's not real. And I could feel it when I let him take over my body. I knew he was, doing that kind of like old god trickery. I get it. He's like, I'm chained, help me escape. It's a game for him. So he enjoys this. And this is how he's still getting worshipped. So they keep him chained behind that. And then they use him, his all knowing, all seeing power, to get information or to, they think he's, powerful. So they feel more powerful when they're around him. But he's not really doing anything. He knows that. He thinks it's funny, because I was letting him speak through me. And it's just weird to see something so massive. When I saw him, people think he's a dragon or something. But when I saw him, he just looked like this huge, like, blob, like almost. He didn't really have a form, but he had like these little, I don't know, flippers or something. It was really strange to see. And I didn't find him real, yeah, I didn't feel like a slimy energy or anything. More like trickster. I
and,
don't know
and,
if you know, like a trickster god. Yeah.
in what
He had
way
that energy.
in what way were you able to perceive him visually? Like
And he took
hypnotic
over my
state?
body. Yes, a trance. He took over my body. I was assisting a friend to try to help get some information. So I let him take over my body and he looks through my eyes. I look through his eyes, and like I said, I didn't feel like that weird, slimy feeling. There's been a couple entities that I let take over my body. Like one was like Abraxas. He felt very slimy. He had that very heavy energy. But Leviathan was different. He felt like almost like silly and trickster. Like he thought he was playing games and teasing us and tricking us. That's how I felt, like he was teasing us.
See,
Like, ha ha ha.
my question would be,
Yes.
why would why would the government want anything to do with demons and jinns? Because
Power.
they are tricksters. They
Power.
are not going to tell you the truth. So for them, it would seem like it would just be something that is counterproductive because they need the information, but they're not going to get the information.
Yes, you do get it, because seeing them as liars is a religious program. That's what religion teaches us. And I I thought that too. Because I thought, I was raised in the church. I thought, I've seen this in a lot of movies. I know what this is. I read about this. They're trying to trick me. They're not. This thing was trying to protect me. So it's been so, like I said at the beginning, it's very conflicting to
Yes,
try
yes.
to get away
Yeah,
from
I think that's a great.
my old programming, and thinking that, they're just trying to trick me, but it was humans more trying to trick me, and then they were trying to give me the truth. So I've gotten so much truths from them. That's why it's kind of turned me around. Like, I don't know, I think it's I don't want to say I believe or disbelieve anything I've seen. It's just, this is the experience, and I want people to, just look at it and just have an open mind. There's things out there we just don't know, and that we've been programmed to think a certain way. And what is going to happen if it really wasn't that way that they've trained us to believe? Then what? Then what's there to be afraid of then, if it's not like what we thought? Then the government can't control us. These people that are in power, they won't be able to control us as much if we're not afraid of what they taught us to be afraid of.
That makes sense. It makes sense. But to me, it just
Mhm.
I can't wrap my head around a jinn or some other demonic force having a purpose for people like us. It's
Well,
just
But think about
so
it. Think about it right now. You are talking to a jinn. You're talking to a demonic entity right now. You've let me have a platform on your show. So in a way, you have, opened yourself up to something different and something unexplained and the unknown. You've opened yourself up to it, and you're not harmed. There's no whirlwind, there's no tornado, of this, kind of what they consider like ultimate knowledge. There's been no harm to it, except for learning. So it's different than what it's been different for me and what I thought before, like my whole life. Everything changed when I was able to, get this information and you really expand on it. This is nothing like I ever thought I could find. This was more than I ever thought would be there for me to find.
And I just want to add,
Yes.
because really that's a great question, Todd, about, how do they get around the deceitfulness of the entities and obtain things that are useful,
Right.
that
I
are
don't find it, but that's the thing.
uh,
I don't find the entities deceitful. I find humans deceitful. The entities have told me more
Hmm.
truth than any human has.
well, could it be that the
well,
entities are steering you to believe that what they're saying is the truth?
Why would they need to do that when I'm already one of them? But that's a religious programming. That's something from religion. That's from myths. That's from religion. That's not from me. This is my own experience. I'm not
well,
using religion to view it. So it's different.
Right.
and also there's, this dynamic. They want things from us, or from the government. They want rituals, and sacrificial rituals, and the energy
They
from
don't
that,
want
or at
sacrifice.
least some of them do. I mean,
No, I've never
you
met
don't
one
think
that
that's true?
wants. I've only met one.
Well, then what? So
They want
how
reverence.
do you square then just
They want reverence.
all of the, going back to antiquity, the rituals that were performed, by
That's
various
performed by humans.
societies?
That's performed by humans.
But it's
Not
performed
by
by humans with being told by
no.
demonic
Unless
forces.
unless they had a host to tell them to do it, like me, then how would they know who's telling them?
Well, I would imagine if you're
But it's
really
just
wrapped up
imagining. Unless you're
into the
really
occult.
there and you're doing it, it's just imagining. You're going by old, views of what we thought this is. I thought the same thing, trust me. Do you think this wasn't mind
But
expanding for me? It was out of the ordinary for me to see the reality that, and for me, that was so different from what I had been raised to see. Like I said,
right,
it was very conflicting.
and I don't want you to think that we're I don't want to
No,
put
I totally get it. No, I get this every time. It's fine. I love
we're
talking
just
about it.
trying to
Yeah.
elaborate to try to make more sense of
Yeah, and I just think it's so important to people to know that it is based in a certain fundamental programming that many of us were brought up in, and not just that, but also movies, myths, books. You're going by that. We're all going by that. We all did. It's not from direct experience. Like mine is from direct experience. That's why it's different.
Mhm.
So I'm not going to say you're wrong in thinking that all the entities are deceitful. If that's what you want to believe, that's totally up to you and your decision on what you want to see in the world. And that's what they told me. It's your decision what you want to see in the world.
well,
If
yeah,
you want to consider me to be evil, then I can be. That's what Lucifer told me. He said,
right.
if you want me to be the villain in your life, I can be, because I will make that sacrifice for you to be that person to come in and harm your life and be that scary person. If that's what you need, I'll do it, he said. But he said, that's not really who I am. He's like, I'm way more than that, but I'm also less. Just like God, he said, I'm everything and nothing at the same time. So he said he doesn't feel harmed when we consider him to be the Prince of Darkness. He said, I am not that thing, but it's okay if you see me like that. He said, I know what the books say. I know what it's been talked about since the beginning of time about who they think I am. But Lucifer said, I am really not that person.
Right, and
It's
I'm
so
not
interesting. It's so amazing to hear this. Yeah, it's so amazing.
sure, and I'm not trying
Yeah.
to uh, associate any of that, but I'm just wondering how can a person
Mhm.
take their word as factual?
Because
If,
but if it's not, but you're going by a religious program. When you're considering saying they're lies, that's a religious view.
well,
Because
yes,
where are you getting that idea from?
but where would you get the idea that they're telling you the truth?
Because that's my experience. If your experience is religious, you'll have a different experience. My experience is being closer to them and coming straight from their mouths. Your
Okay,
idea
okay.
of it is from a book, is from movies.
No,
Mine is
I
from
don't.
direct experience.
I I don't practice any of.
I'm not a Satanist. I don't practice. I want to make that clear because I thought I made it clear at the beginning. I'm not a Satanist. I don't practice any religion.
Sure,
I don't
sure.
subscribe to organized religion. That's not my thing. I'm spiritual. So this is
Right.
an experience I've had by my abilities to get this information. I'm not trying to force anybody to believe in demons or that demons are good or bad.
Sure.
I'm neutral on it because that's how I viewed it myself, is that they're a neutral party in it.
Right.
They can be what you want them to be in your world, just like anybody can be, based on
That's
your perspective.
that's correct. And it's based on your experience. So your experience to you is completely what
Completely
you
different
believe.
from somebody else.
Yes,
No, it's
exactly.
not just what I believe, it's a direct experience. I don't consider it a belief system because I don't believe in demons. I've connected to them by direct experience.
Correct. Correct. Well, I will tell you what, this is a fascinating subject. And there is so much that I would love to delve into, Olivia, with you,
Yeah,
especially.
thank you so much. It was so
I think
interesting.
I think there's just immense value
Yes,
to get information straight from the horse's mouth, as
yes,
far as, not to use an animal term, but straight from the source
yeah,
about, their philosophy, how they think, what they think they're doing. I think you don't get that kind of direct uh, feedback, from them that often. There's such a mystery. I mean, I will grant that there's so much difficulty in getting, direct information about these entities and different forms of consciousness, that I think this just brings immense value to just hear it straight from someone who, who has been that, who has who has lived that life, and who knows about it.
yes,
Yeah, we didn't get to talk about me being a praying mantis. I saw somebody mentioned it because I used to be
yes.
a mantid being in a past life and or parallel life, and
Mm,
I've got so many direct details about their life. It's amazing. They've had such an amazing lifestyle. I love it. I love talking about the mantids. So there's a lot more to it than just me being able to talk to demons. I've been able to look into an entire world of some of these other races and how they
mm,
live, and it's nothing like we would expect, especially for like the mantids.
mhm,
They're very spiritual beings, very advanced spiritual beings. They have their own culture, they have their own social system, they're a hive mind, but at the same time, and they follow a queen, but she's more than just that. They're very connected to each other, and they have a lot of mythology built up. There's a particular fungus, kind of like a algae, that grows in their desolate planet, but this particular algae has sustained them for lifetimes. So they've built up an entire religion based on this phosphorescent algae because they use it for their own body system, and also they can use it to light caves and things like that. So they've built up a religion, and they call that the liquid light father. That's what they consider to be their god, in a form of their god. Like here on their planet, they considered that algae to be that personification of God here on their planet.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I would love to go into that in another podcast. I mean, the
Yeah, it's
mantis
amazing.
beings are such an enigma.
Oh, I love it. Yeah,
They're
they're so
much,
amazing.
they're much more of a rare species, that people come across,
They're good
and
people. I
there's a
consider
lot
them
of,
good people. They're good people.
yeah, that's what Simon Parks seems to think, who's one of the, I think, better sources of information on the mantid beings.
Was he in contact with mantids, or?
Yeah, so he's a contactee. I mean, he shares some kind of soul history with them for sure, and he's a contactee with a lifelong history of contact experiences and communication
Okay.
with the
That's
mantid.
interesting.
Yeah, he's Simon Parks. He's a really good source of information on that. Yeah, we should come back to this in another podcast. This would be very interesting to go
Yeah,
into.
thank you. So interesting.
Yes.
And perhaps
Yeah.
that could shed a lot of light on the exopolitics situation, on planet Earth, because I think they have a pretty serious and significant role in what's going on here. So, yeah, we'll have
Yes.
to do that.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot more that we need to discuss. And like I said, Olivia, I'm not trying to disprove you at all. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
Yeah, no problem.
With-
It's information that it's not really readily available. So it's going to
That's
take
correct.
time for people to, ingest it.
Mm.
It just does. And I'm aware of it. That's why I wrote books. So it's, it's the information's there if people want to seek it out and just to see, a different perspective on things.
Yes, and it's very fascinating. It's
Very interesting perspective. Yeah.
it's very fascinating, and your experience is your experience, and that's why you are here. We want to know about these experiences and what you've been through, because everyone's is different. So if anyone wants to get this book, it's on Amazon. I did put the link in the comments, so it is in the comments as well, and I will actually post it as well on the Facebook page. I think it is already on the promos, things like that. But Gray Mouse, Sex Space, and Mind Control, Olivia James. If you just go to Amazon, type in Olivia James, her book will come right up. That is exactly how I got it. Olivia, you still with us?
Yeah, thank you. Yep. I'm here.
Okay. I thought I lost you.
I've talked for 2 hours. I figured I'd give somebody else a chance.
All right. Well, Olivia, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It was amazing.
Yes, we will reach back out to you. Jim, is there any last minute things that you would like to ask Olivia?
No, I guess we'll wrap it up there. But yeah, we should definitely do another podcast and get into more of the SSP experience.
Yes.
And all that.
Yes. I would love to hear about the mantids.
Yeah, about Mars.
I mean, Mars, everything. I am very interested on the second half of this. All right, everybody. I want to thank you, Olivia, very much. Jim,
Yeah, thank you.
And yes, I hope everybody that was listening and joining in, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good one. Thank you for tuning in with us tonight. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. A Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure is looking to talk with ufologists, researchers, investigators, contactees, abductees, channelers, and more for upcoming shows. Or if you have stories, photos, videos, questions, suggestions, or comments, please contact us through Messenger or email us at paranomalypodcast@gmail.com. And you can also visit us at paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. I thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure.